Unbelievable neighborly pool trespassing. A few years back, my spouse and I invested in a home that came with a pool. We've met most of our neighbors, and while everyone seems pleasant enough, we haven't really formed close friendships with any of them. To our immediate right lives a family of 6, twin daughters in university, a high school-age son, a younger daughter in early elementary school, and their parents. Typically, we get our pool ready for swimming around early May and keep it open until the end of October. However, this year, the weather threw us for a loop. May was unusually cool and rainy, and then June suddenly jumped into scorching 100+ degree temperatures. I'm also on medication right now that makes it difficult for me to tolerate prolonged sun and heat exposure. Plus, we've been assisting some extended family members dealing with health issues. Because of all this, our pool hasn't been opened yet this season. We usually head to our family's lake house for a week during each of the major holidays. We skipped Memorial Day this year due to flooding at the lake, and with a family member just discharged from the hospital and July 4th falling on a Thursday, we decided to stay home this week to be available to help. Throughout June, the little girl next door has spotted my husband or me outside and repeatedly asked when we were opening the pool. Initially, we said maybe later, but the last time she asked, yesterday, I told her we probably wouldn't open it at all this year. She burst into tears. We've never invited any neighbors over to use our pool, so her reaction to us not opening it was puzzling. Later, I was chatting with the neighbor on our left, and I found out that our neighbors to the right have apparently been having a small family gathering at our pool every 4th of July when we're away. They have always cleaned up meticulously afterward, and since we have scheduled pool maintenance and weekly yard service, things occasionally get moved around in our yard, but we never really thought much of it. Our neighbor on the left was under the impression that we had given the other neighbors permission to use our pool. We did give them permission to retrieve any toys or balls that accidentally landed in our yard, and my husband even showed the father how to open the gate to get them, but we certainly never gave permission for them to use our pool, especially not when we weren't even home. We have a specific latch on the gate for security. Now my husband, who is a tech enthusiast, is planning to install more security cameras around the exterior of our house, specifically covering the gate and pool area. He's also looking into getting a remote access gate latch for our pool service and yard maintenance crew. Luckily, we have a friend who specializes in cameras and home automation systems. I'm really annoyed that our neighbors have been using our pool without our consent for years, but my husband is secretly thrilled that this situation is giving him an excuse to add more gadgets to our home security setup. Now we're debating whether we should confront the neighbors directly and let them know we're aware of their pool usage, or if we should just wait and see if they mention anything about our new security cameras. Seriously, years of secret pool parties? The audacity is truly something else, folks. If you want more stories about entitled neighbors, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Senior Citizens Atomic Meltdown at the Oppenheimer premiere. This isn't the most earth-shattering tale of entitlement you'll ever hear, but it definitely qualifies. Securing tickets for Oppenheimer in my area was a surprisingly difficult task. After much searching, the only option I could find was a 9:30 p.m. showing on a Saturday night. Not exactly ideal timing for me, but I was determined to see the movie, and at least I figured a late showing would mean fewer noisy kids. I arrived, grabbed my mandatory movie snacks, my Skittles and a soda, and settled into my seat. A few minutes into the previews, this woman, who I'll call Karen, shows up. She marches directly to what she believes is her assigned seat, pauses, apparently decides it's not to her liking, and then storms back into my aisle. She then proceeds to accost the person sitting about 3 seats to my left, launching into a tirade about how she should be given that particular seat. Now, this is one of those modern theaters with luxurious reclining seats and ample space, so there's no need for anyone to stand up to let people pass. The person to my right, clearly sensing the impending drama, starts recording the scene on their phone, and I lean forward intrigued and ready to witness the unfolding spectacle. Karen is now in full swing, berating this poor guy about how he needs to relinquish his premium seat, a seat, I might add, that he had legitimately reserved in advance. Her demands and justifications escalated rapidly into the truly bizarre. She insisted he needed to respect his elders, as if age automatically entitled her to preferential treatment and someone else's pre-booked seat. Then she shifted gears, accusing him of failing to show respect to women, somehow twisting a seating dispute into a gender issue. In a truly baffling turn, she then accused him of using cancel culture on her just because she's white. It's worth noting, for context, that the man she was berating was also white, completely undermining her nonsensical racial accusation. Finally, in a crescendo of entitled nonsense, she declared that he needed to stop being a lazy, entitled millennial. The irony of her using the term entitled in this situation was truly lost on her. And the utterly ridiculous reason she gave for why this man should surrender his seat? Brace yourselves. She claimed that because she had to endure atom bomb drills in elementary school during the Cold War, she deserved to have a good view for this movie. Yes, you read that right. Atom bomb drills from decades ago apparently entitled her to commandeer someone else's movie seat in 2023. Completely dumbfounded by the sheer audacity of this woman, I discreetly pulled out my phone and called the theater's customer service line. The person who answered could clearly hear Karen's escalating rant in the background. They sighed and said, "Let me guess, Theater 4? Security will be there in a second. You're our 5th call about her." True to their word, theater security arrived swiftly, escorted the still protesting Karen out of the theater, and the rest of us were finally able to watch the movie in peace, albeit slightly delayed and thoroughly entertained by the pre-show drama. Ex-girlfriend's outrageous entitlement after cheating. I recently discovered that my girlfriend of 11 years had been unfaithful. To make matters even more unbelievable, it was with a guy who was unemployed. It's not as though I'm wealthy, but I provided her with a comfortable lifestyle. I covered the majority of her expenses, ensured we lived in a nice home, and made sure she could regularly get her nails and hair done. We went on dates every weekend and took a couple of vacations each year. She had clearly become accustomed to this standard of living and desperately wanted to maintain it, even after betraying me with someone who couldn't offer her any of it. She never actually confessed to cheating. I pieced it together myself. But once it became clear that I was ending the relationship, the truly shocking level of entitlement began to surface. She actually had the audacity to suggest that because my family lived nearby and hers didn't, I should be the one to move out of our home, but continue paying all the bills. This, she reasoned, would give her and her new boyfriend a chance to get on their feet. As if that wasn't enough, she also insisted on keeping my dogs, my beloved pets. She declared that I would only be allowed to see my own dogs if I asked permission from her new boyfriend. And since they were supposedly struggling financially, she expected me to continue paying for their food and veterinary care. Instead of agreeing to this absurd proposition, I made the decision to end things decisively. I told her to leave and of course kept my dogs. Understandably, she was furious, but her sense of entitlement to my income remained undiminished. After I made it clear she needed to move out of my place, she fabricated a story, claiming she had been forced to quit her job because my actions had forced her to relocate. Then, in a truly unbelievable move, she attempted to sue me for lost wages based on this fabricated claim. Unsurprisingly, this legal maneuver did not go in her favor. You would think that after such a series of failures she might finally give up, but incredibly she doubled down. She contacted my workplace and threatened to sue them, stating, "Your employees' actions cost me everything," and brazenly demanded that they settle out of court with her for the sum of $100,000, an amount far exceeding her actual annual income. Instead of capitulating to her outrageous demands, my employer quite rightly filed harassment charges against her. Even after facing legal repercussions and repeated rejection, she still didn't stop. She then began messaging every family member of mine she could find online. She told them a sob story about how I had cost her everything out of spite simply because she had moved on with someone else, and that the least they could do was send her money to help her find a new place to live and pay her rent. When this pathetic attempt at financial manipulation also failed, she resorted to public begging online. She started posting on social media, desperately pleading for strangers to send money to her Cash App to help her secure housing, falsely claiming it was a domestic violence situation. It is utterly beyond my comprehension how she can't grasp the fundamental reality that any financial support I provided her was contingent on our relationship. We weren't married, we don't have children together. I supported her generously for over a decade, but I owe her absolutely nothing now, especially not to subsidize her new relationship with the person she cheated on me with. The fact that this basic concept seems to be utterly shocking to her is just mind-boggling. Wait, she tried to sue your workplace? This went from entitled X to full-blown delusional, faster than you can say restraining order. Drive-Thru, Diva's downfall, entitlement, tantrums, and police intervention at Chick-fil-A. I was grabbing some lunch at Chick-fil-A the other day. This particular location has a pretty efficient drive-thru setup with 2 lanes, one for regular orders and a separate express lane for mobile orders. The mobile order lane is a game changer. You order ahead on the app, scan a QR code when you arrive, and usually bypass the regular line completely. It's always been incredibly fast and convenient. Until this day, enter the entitled woman, EW. She immediately cut me off as we were both pulling into the parking lot. Red flag number 1, but I let it slide. The mobile order lane was empty at that moment, so it wasn't a huge deal in the grand scheme of things. I pulled into the mobile order lane behind her car, and right away I noticed something was off. Instead of holding up her phone to scan a QR code like any normal mobile order customer, she was just sitting in her car, waving at the drive-thru attendants. Apparently, she didn't realize that no one actually monitors the mobile order lane directly. Predictably, she quickly escalated to laying on her car horn, honking like a complete maniac. Finally, an employee came over to see what the commotion was about. Before the poor employee even reached her car window, she started barking out her order at him. And it wasn't a small simple order either. This woman was ordering enough food to feed a small army. After reeling off her massive order, she then proceeded to drive forward without even attempting to pay. The employee literally had to run after her car to get her to stop and take her payment. Once that was sorted, she finally pulled up to the window to collect her food. And guess who was still stuck directly behind her? Me. I had scanned my mobile order code and was ready to grab my food and go in seconds, but now I was completely held up by this woman's antics. When she reached the window, the employee politely asked her to pull forward to one of the designated waiting spots. She flatly refused, declaring, "No, it always takes longer if I pull around." The employee, showing incredible patience, tried to explain that pulling forward wouldn't actually delay her order at all. It was simply to allow them to serve the customers behind her whose mobile orders were ready and waiting. She doubled down, responding with, "It's not really fair to prepare their orders before mine when I was here first." The employee attempted to explain the basic concept of how different food preparation stations work in a fast food restaurant, but she just cut him off mid-sentence. Condescendingly, she said, "They should all be working on the first person's order. I know you just make minimum wage, but this really shouldn't be that hard to understand." After what felt like an eternity of this ridiculous standoff, the manager finally appeared at the window. He leaned out and in an incredibly calm and professional manner, politely asked her to pull forward. He even went above and beyond, promising to personally bring her food out to her car as soon as it was ready. To further smooth things over, he offered her a complimentary peppermint milkshake as an apology for the inconvenience. And what was her response to this incredibly generous attempt at customer service? She deliberately knocked the milkshake right out of his hand. The milkshake went flying everywhere, all over the manager, inside the drive-thru window, creating total chaos and sticky peppermint mess. And she actually had the audacity to beep her horn at him after doing that. But this is where karma thankfully decided to intervene. Just a couple of minutes later, 2 police officers walked around the front of the drive-thru lane heading directly towards her car. Entitled woman in disbelief laughed at the manager and sneered, "You really called the police?" The manager, remaining remarkably composed, calmly responded, "No ma'am, they were actually at the counter inside when I walked by, covered in the milkshake you just knocked over. They also heard your shouting and honking from inside. I told them it was fine, but they wanted to check on the situation themselves." At this point, the officers reached her car and informed her that if she didn't pull forward and speak with them immediately, they would arrest her for assault and have her car move themselves. She finally reluctantly pulled forward, but she didn't stop. She just sped right out of the parking lot. The police officers just looked at each other and started laughing. Apparently, her car had a very distinctive and easy to remember vanity license plate. They told the manager that they would be adding obstruction of justice for failing to comply with a lawful order to her charges when they tracked her down. I know not all stories on here have satisfying endings, so I thought I'd share this one, especially during the holiday season. It was definitely a moment of instant karma and justice served drive-thru style. She knocked the milkshake out of his hand and then honked at him. The entitlement is off the charts. What's the most ridiculous thing you've seen someone do in a drive-thru? Mom assumes lavish lifestyle in my country, no invitation needed. This bizarre conversation unfolded at my grandmother's wake, my mother looking incredibly self-satisfied and smirking as if she was superior to everyone else in the room, plate of food in hand, plopped herself down on the couch next to my aunt and me. It turns out she had somehow concocted this entire fantasy in her head that she would be moving to my partner's country with us and our children. Her reasoning? Grandma had passed away, freeing her from any perceived responsibilities, and she was retired. So in her mind, this meant she was entitled to a free, luxurious retirement in a wealthy Scandinavian country without having to lift a finger. She had even been going around telling people about her grand plans to live this extravagant, effortless life abroad. Without any preamble, she loudly asked me, "So, when does my flight leave?" I was completely taken aback and asked her what on earth she was talking about. She then announced even louder so that everyone nearby could clearly hear, "You know, our flight back to your husband's country so I can finally live luxuriously like you promised me." The only promise I had ever made her was to minimize contact after returning home. Being someone who is incapable of mincing words, I bluntly informed her, in no uncertain terms, that her delusional plan was never going to happen. I told her I wasn't foolish enough to bring her toxic presence anywhere near my children. The look on her face was priceless, the ultimate expression of shock and disbelief. My aunt and several other relatives in the room burst into laughter. She seemed to think she had misheard me, so I repeated myself, making sure there was no room for misinterpretation. "You are not moving in with me," I stated firmly. "You need to completely erase that idea from your brain right now. You are a dangerous, lazy, and greedy person, and I absolutely refuse to expose my children to that kind of negative energy." Predictably, she erupted into a tantrum, yelling and shouting about how she was entitled to move in with me and be taken care of by her family. I stood my ground and argued back, explaining that unless she was prepared to find her own place to live over there, find employment, learn the local language, and actually contribute to society, she would not survive. I have children to prioritize, and I'm not willing to divert my energy and time away from them to cater to her lazy and entitled demands. She then completely shut down and refused to speak to me for the rest of the evening, which was perfectly fine by me and frankly fine by everyone else who had witnessed her ridiculous outburst. They were all thoroughly amused by her utter delusion and the spectacular way her entitled fantasy had been publicly deflated. The audacity to just assume she is moving in for a luxurious retirement. Unbelievable. For more entitled parent stories, hit subscribe and have an awesome rest of your day.